Today, we're diving into a really powerful and honestly kind of counterintuitive technique for making sure your projects succeed. And the secret? Well, it involves starting by imagining complete and total failure.
I mean, think about it. You've been there, right? You've got a project with what looks like a bulletproof plan, a super talented team, all the resources you could ask for, and yet somehow it still goes completely off the rails. Why do our best-laid plans so often crumble when they meet reality?
The answer, and this is wild, is actually wired right into our own brains. It's our natural human tendency to be optimistic. We get so focused on what success is going to look like that we end up creating these massive blind spots to the very things that are waiting to trip us up. And that leads us directly into what we can call the optimism trap. It's a problem that comes from the way we typically plan for the future, a technique known as backcasting, which, as you'll see, can be a real double-edged sword. So you've really got two ways to look ahead. The traditional way, backcasting, is all about imagining success. It feels great, right? It definitely fosters optimism, but it also creates those dangerous blind spots. The other path, though, well, that's perspective hindsight. It asks you to imagine failure, to challenge that optimism head-on, and to go looking for all those hidden risks you would have missed otherwise. So how do we escape this trap? Well, we do something that feels completely unnatural. We start by deliberately working backward from failure. And this is the whole foundation of a really powerful technique called the pre-mortem. Now, a pre-mortem isn't about being a pessimist. Not at all. It's more like a structured exercise in realism. The leader gets the whole team together and just sets the scene. Okay, everyone, the project is over, and it was a spectacular failure. The team's job is then to generate every single possible reason why this disaster happened. And this isn't just some clever management fad, it's a really powerful cognitive technique. It was actually developed by a psychologist, Gary Klein, who called it perspective hindsight. His research proved that when you imagine an event has already happened, your brain gets way, way better at correctly identifying all the reasons why. All right, so how do you actually run one of these? It's a surprisingly straightforward 4-step process that pretty much any team can use. So here's the roadmap. First, you've got to imagine the failure to really set the stage. Then, the team just goes for it, brainstorming every possible cause. After that, you've got to sort through all of it, categorize the risks, and prioritize them. And finally, and this is the most important part, you develop a real plan to deal with them, assigning owners to create concrete actions to prevent those failures. Let's look at those first 2 steps a bit closer. Step 1 is all about the framing. The project leader's job is to make the failure feel real, inescapable. You use a prompt just like this one. See, by stating the failure as a past event, you give your team permission to raise all kinds of concerns and criticisms without sounding negative or, disloyal. It completely changes the dynamic. Okay, for step 2, the brainstorming, here's a powerful way to shift your mindset. Don't think like a manager in an office. I want you to think like a mountaineer leading an expedition. Your survival, quite literally, depends on anticipating everything that could possibly go wrong. A climbing team doesn't just plan for the summit. No way. They obsess over potential disasters. What if a blizzard hits? What if someone gets injured? What if we run out of supplies? They brainstorm every reason the mission could fail. And in that context, is identifying risks pessimism? Of course not. It's a survival strategy. This process does so much more than just identify risks. When you use it regularly, it can fundamentally change a team's culture, shifting it from just being risk-averse to being truly resilient. You can really see the 2 different realities here. On one side, you have the team that avoids talking about failure. They're always in reactive crisis mode, lurching from one preventable mess to the next. And on the other side, well, that's the goal. A team that proactively seeks out failure points. They don't just react. They build that resilience into the plan from day one. The ultimate goal is to foster what I like to call a culture of productive hecklers. People who feel safe and are in fact encouraged to challenge assumptions and poke holes in the plan. In a pre-mortem, these people aren't being negative. They are your most valuable players for sure. And here's the thing. It really works.
Studies and a ton of real-world practice show that a huge number of the risks you find in a pre-mortem, often the most critical ones, were not found during standard risk planning. The pre-mortem actively uncovers those unknown unknowns that are just waiting to sink your project.
Okay, so you're sold on the idea. You're thinking, I need to do this. How do you actually bring this into your own team or organization and make it work? For anybody in a leadership position, the actions are crystal clear. First, you have to make this a required step for any big initiative. Second, you have to actively protect those productive hecklers and create a psychologically safe space for people to disagree. And third, and this is so critical, you have to act on what you find. A list of risks is totally useless without a concrete plan to mitigate them.
Now, a quick word of caution here. You have to avoid failure theater. That's where you're just going through the motions. The commitment from everyone has to be genuine. And remember to always frame the goal correctly. This isn't about dwelling on the negative. It's about finding every possible threat so you can build a plan that's robust enough to win. So we'll leave you with this final thought. Go ahead and take a look at the most important project on your plate right now. What catastrophic failure should you force yourself and your team to imagine today in order to absolutely guarantee its success tomorrow?